The polished marble floors of the Bramble Creek Grand Hotel's ballroom glinted under thousands of tiny fairy lights strung across vaulted ceilings, every guest wrapped in floor-length silk gowns and tailored black tuxedos. Soft jazz hummed from a live quartet tucked against the far wall, mixed with the low murmur of wealthy developers, city council members, and state political staff here to celebrate Julian Voss's 50th birthday. The room reeked of expensive champagne, vanilla candle wax, and the quiet tension of a high-stakes networking event disguised as a family party. Alara Voss lingered at the back double doors, her simple black wrap dress stark next to the crystal-embellished gown swirling around her. She'd bought the second-hand dress from a thrift store downtown 2 days prior, paired with scuffed nude flats that felt worlds away from the designer stilettos every other woman in the room wore. Clutched tight in one sweating palm was a small carved wooden box, something she'd spent 3 weekends sanding and staining herself for her father. No fancy catered gift baskets, no engraved silver, just something handmade, the only thing she could afford on her barista hourly wage. 3 years had passed since her parents cut her off entirely, freezing her trust fund, blocking her from the family mansion, all because she'd refused to drop her part-time cafe job and enroll in the real estate management program Marianne had handpicked for her. Her mother had screamed that working minimum wage behind a coffee counter ruined the Voss name, that Alara's refusal to play the perfect socialite daughter made them a laughingstock among their elite circle. Julian had stood silent beside Marianne the whole his jaw tight, never uttering a single word in Alara's defense. She'd left the mansion that night with only a duffel bag of clothes, and she hadn't set foot at a single family function since. Tonight was different. Alara missed her father fiercely, missed the quiet mornings they'd spent fishing at the lake before Marianne's social obligations swallowed every minute of his schedule. She'd mapped out a quick, painless plan. Slip through the crowd, hand him the wooden box, exchange a 2-minute quiet, then slip out before Marianne spotted her and spiraled into rage. She'd waited until half the guests crowded the buffet table by the stage, slipping past a distracted uniformed hotel security guard to slip fully inside the bar. She'd only made it halfway across the dance floor when a sharp, ice-cold voice cut through the clutter, sharp enough to hush the nearby guests. "How dare you sneak here?" Alara froze mid-step, every muscle locking up. Marianne stood 10 feet away, red silk gown swishing as she stormed across the marble, her diamond earrings swinging violently with every quick. Her face had drained of all its usual polished composure, cheeks flushed bright scarlet, eyes blazing with unfiltered. The small bubble of conversation around them popped quickly. Every pair of eyes within a 20-foot radius locked onto the mother-daughter, champagne flutes pausing sip, forks hovering over filet mignon plates. "Mom, I just came to give Dad..." Ella tried, lifting the wooden box in a placate gesture, her voice thin and shaky under dozens of watching. Before she could finish sentence, Marianne's palm cracked hard against Ella. The slap echoed loud enough to cut through the jazz music, a sharp, stinging crack that sent a wave of stunned silence rippling outward through. Alara's head snapped aside, the wooden box slipping from her grasp to clatter open on the marble floor, small carved oak chips spilling across the shiny stone. A dull, burning heat bloomed across her right cheek instantly, embarrassment flooding her chest hot enough to make her eyes sting with She stumbled backward a step, staring at her mother in stunned disbelief, unable to process what had just happened in front of every powerful person her father needed to impress. Marianne leaned in close, her voice a venomous hiss only Alara could hear over the collective quiet gasp. "You have no right to face here. You're here to embarrass us, to ruin every deal Julian spent a year lining up well. Get out before I call security." Alara's gaze darted past her mother, searching for Julian. He stood near the birthday cake display a short distance away, face pale, hands loose. He'd seen the slap, seen her box to the floor, watched his wife humiliate their daughter in front of him. He stared, his gaze flicking nervously toward the front VIP table where Governor Alara sat, as if his business permits mattered more than Alara's burning cheek and her pride. He didn't move an inch between them, didn't open his mouth to calm Anne down, didn't spare her a single. That quiet abandonment stung far worse than the physical blow still throbbing across her skin. More guests turned to watch the spectacle now, whispers swelling soft around them. Alara caught fragments of gossip through the air. "That's the estranged Voss girl, isn't it? The one who works at a coffee shop?" Marianne never lets her near these events. Her throat tightened, shame coiling heavy in her stomach. She'd come hoping for one small moment of her father, and instead she'd walked straight into a public demolition of every scrap of dignity she'd clung to over 3 lonely years. Mary raised her hand again, as if ready to strike a second time, and Alara flinched back automatically, lifting one face. That small motion seemed to snap something loose. A chair scraped loud against the carpet at the front VIP table. Governor Elias Hale stood low and deliberate, pushing his linen-covered back with one hand, the crystal water glass beside his place setting rattling movement. The silver spoon he'd been holding tapped one rim of his goblet. a sharp little sound that silenced every lingering murmur in the ballroom. Every single guest's attention snapped away from Laura and Marianne, locking entirely onto the tall gray-haired governor as he straightened his tailored navy blazer, his gaze fixed unwaveringly across the crowded on Alara. The burning on Alara's cheek faded a distant throb, replaced by a cold, twisted confusion in her chest. She barely knew Governor Hale, only seen him briefly at a handful of galas when she was younger, cut her off. Why was he standing now, interrupting her mother's screaming tirade to fit his full focus on her? No one else in the room to him in that moment. Not Julian's birthday. Not the multi-million-dollar development deals celebrate. Marianne followed a line of sight to the governor, her furious expression shifting fast into a flicker of awe, unmasked panic. A flash of fear Alara had never once seen cross her mother's pert face before. Marianne's shoulders tensed rigid, and she lowered her raised hand slowly, her jaw clamped tight as she shot a panicked, desperate glance toward Julian, silently begging him to step in and fix the mess. But Julian remained frozen where he stood, helpless and silent, unable to tear his eyes away from Governor Hale's imposing figure at the front of the room. The whole ballroom hung in dead quiet, every person waiting to hear what her plan to say next. What secret he was about to unveil that made Marianne's composure crack so completely. The entire ballroom fell dead silent. Governor Hale stood rigid at the VIP table, his sharp gray eyes fixed unwaveringly on Alara. No one dared speak, move, or make a sound. Marianne's fleeting panic hardened into blatant terror, her red lips trembling as she slowly lowered her raised hand. For decades, she'd cultivated a flawless image of grace and control within Bramble Creek's elite circles, destroyed in one reckless, furious public outburst. Governor Hale finally relaxed his stance, offering a subtle, wordless shake of his head, a quiet rebuke, before sitting back down. The room's tense spell broke at once. The jazz quartet restarted its melody shakily, and guests resumed their conversations, though the air buzzed with relentless gossip. Every attendee's attention lingered on the explosive mother-daughter altercation that had disrupted Julian Voss's exclusive birthday gala. Marianne instantly masked her rage with a cold, brittle composure. She closed the distance to Alara and gripped her upper arm hard, nails digging through her thin second-hand dress to yank her forward. Alara's cheek still burned from the public slap, and the rough tug jolted her, her mind still reeling from humiliation and the governor's intense, unblinking focus. "Come with me," Marianne hissed, her voice low and lethal, only loud enough for Alara to hear over the renewed chatter of the crowd. "Now, before you destroy every single thing we've built for this family." Too shaken to resist, Alara let herself be dragged across the marble floor past staring guests. Marianne pulled her into a secluded, soundproof glass VIP lamp, empty and private, the perfect place to unleash her unfiltered fury without onlooker. The second the glass door clicked, Marianne shoved Alara back against the cool wall. Freed from public scrutiny, she dropped her polished facade entirely, her gaze blazing with raw resentment and unmasked. "Do you realize what you've risked tonight?" Marianne snapped sharp. "Governor Hale's signature makes or breaks your father's multi-million-dollar downtown project. One bad and years of countless jobs, and our family's entire legacy collapsed. Yet you snuck in here in that cheap dress, desperate for attention you don't deserve." Alara met her fury with steady defiance, hurt and long-suppressed resentment flaring up. "I didn't come for attention. I came to give Dad a birthday gift. We haven't spoken once. I only wanted to acknowledge him. I had no intention of ruining it." "Your very existence here, Marianne retorted. "Your minimum wage barista job, your tiny ant, your refusal to act like a prop boss, makes us a laughingstock among Bramble Creek. Every choice you make to live simply undermines your father's." Her words stung far worse than a slap. For 3 years, Alara had built a humble, independent life, never speaking ill of her parents or tarnishing their reputation. She'd only chosen happiness over their status ill. Marianne viewed her independence as an unforgivable. Before Alara could lie, the lounge door. Julian stepped inside, weary and ridden, closing the door to seal the three of them away. He avoided Alara's gaze entirely, trapped in awkward defeat. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "Alara, leave." Alara's heart ached with familiar. She'd waited years for him to her, but once again, he chose the family's reputation. "You won't even ask her what me?" she asked. Julian's jaw tightened, his gaze flickering briefly to Marianne before settling back on Alara. "Doesn't matter. Governor Hale controls all county development permits. If he leaves with a poor impression of us, my project stalls indefinitely. I can't risk losing everything we've built." A sharp, cold suspicions, Alara. Her mother's over-the-top rage and terror weren't just about social embarrassment business deals. They were. "You're scared of him," said slowly. "Just his approval. You're terrified of what he knows." Marianne's confidence shattered, her face draining of color. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped, her wavering tone betraying fear. I'm only protecting this family from your sickness. Her denial was too quick. Alara knew in that moment that there was a secret buried beneath rage. Something old, powerful. Something Marianne had hiding. Something tied to jail. Julian stepped forward with a tired, hollow plea, repeating the empty promises Alara had him. Just go, kid. I'll call you later, once the permit is properly. Alara saw the truth clearly. Her father would never choose her over his business lies. Tired of begging for validation and hiding in shame, she resolved to stand her ground. She lifted her chin, wiping away her tears with resolve. No, I'm not leaving. Marianne rode dangerously. Excuse me? I came to celebrate your birth, bring you a gift. I've done nothing wrong. I'm not fleeing like a criminal just because Mom is petrified of some secret thing. Marianne prepared to scream, call security. But a soft knock on the glass stopped her cold. Silent. A uniformed hotel staffer stood in the hallway, holding up an unsealed envelope. Pushed the door open slightly, addressing only a low, discreet tone. Ma'am, Governor Hale to deliver this personally. He said it's urgent and no one else should view it. Alara's breath caught. She stepped forward to take the unmarked envelope, its light weight belying the enormous life odds it likely held. A caught in her throat. The member held out the envelope, and Alara forward slowly to take it. Her smooth paper. It was light, unmarked. No return address, no name. The weight of it was enormous. Marianne's face blanched completely, all rage vanishing in frantic terror. She lunged forward instantly, desperate to snatch the envelope from Alara's grasp. Give that to me, she shrieked, abandoning all composure. That doesn't belong to you. Hand it over now. Alara stepped back quickly, tucking the envelope firmly against her chest, out of her mother's reach. She stared at Marianne's trembling, panicked form, certain this held the answers to every lie, betrayal, and growing up. As Marianne advanced again, eyes wild and furious, Alara tightened her grip. She was no longer just fighting for or a moment with her father. She was fighting for the truth, ready to unravel the decades-old secrets the vault buried at all costs. Marianne charged forward, her heels clicking sharp and frantic against the lounge tile, fully intent on ripping the envelope out of Alara's hands. For once, there was no polished performance, no calculated poise, only unfiltered panic, the kind of fear that came from knowing a long-buried secret was moments from breaking free. Alara stepped back again, pressing her shoulder flat to the glass wall, and curled both arms tight around the paper, shielding it against her chest like a lifeline. Stop it, Alara said firmly. Her voice did not shake anymore. The shock of the slap and the weight of her parents' endless neglect had burned away her timidity, leaving only cold, steady resolve. This is for me, not you. You have no right to private messages from the governor, Marianne snarled, reaching again, her fingers scraping against Alara's sleeve. You are a boss and you answer to this family. Hand it over before you destroy everything we've built. Julian finally moved, stepping between them to block Marianne's advance. Alara expected him to side with his wife, to demand she surrender the note and leave the gala at once. Instead, he held a hand up to Marianne, his expression tight and uneasy. Enough. You're causing another scene. His intervention was small, far too late to fix the public humiliation Alara had endured, but it stopped Marianne's frenzy cold. She froze mid-step, her chest heaving, eyes blazing with betrayal and rage toward her own husband. For a beat of tense silence, the balance of their toxic household shifted. Just barely. She cannot keep that, Marianne bit out, her voice low and vicious. You have no idea what this means, Julian. You have no idea what she's about to uncover. Julian's jaw hardened. It's a private correspondence. Let her read it. If it's nothing, we'll send her home quietly. If it's business, the governor will address it publicly soon. The words landed like a quiet bombshell. Marianne's face went ill, her confident fury deflating into raw, helpless red. She knew exactly what the note contained, and she knew she could not stop it any longer, not without exposing herself entirely in front of Julian and Alara. Alara did not wait for further argument. She turned on her heel and slipped out of the lounge, leaving her parents locked in a silent, charged state. She weaved through the thinning gala crowd, one hand clamped securely over the envelope tucked inside her dress. The guests still whispered as she passed, their curious, judgmental glances burning into her. But she no longer cared about their... She only cared about the truth hidden inside that plain white. She ducked into a quiet, empty women's restroom at the end of the way, locking the door. The soft hum of the gala faded through the thickles, leaving her in still, heavy... Leaning against the cool marble counter, she finally pulled out the envelope and tore it open with trembling. The note inside, handwritten in neat formal script, no fluff, no pleasantries. Alara, what Marianne has spent decades hiding is not a social... It is a legal truth tied to the late Senator Lila Mae Carter. You were never merely their daughter. You were her protected ward. The records were sealed, hidden, and nearly destroyed. I have preserved them. Stay till my toast. The truth will be spoken tonight. Each Alara's breath entirely. Knew that name, Lila Mae Carter. As a child, she'd found an old locked yearbook in the attic, its cover embossed with those initials. Marianne had snatched away instantly, snapping that it was old, meaningless junk, ordering her again. She'd burned the book days later, lying that it had been ruined by water damage. Ilara had been too young to question it then, writing it off as another one of her mother's arbitrary rules. Now it all case. The secrecy, the explosive terror of the governor's presence, the desperate need to keep Ilara away from any political figure with opens. It was never about Ilara's humble job or her unpunishment. It was about covering up. Senator Lila Mae Carter had been one of Oregon's most respected politicians, a close ally to Governor Hale, a woman with immense legal influence and a vast trust. Ilara was her ward. That meant she had legal rights, inheritance, status, rights Marianne had stolen from her, buried from her, denied her. A sharp knock pounded against the restroom door, loud and demanding. "Ilara, open this door right now." Marianne's voice screamed through the wood, shrill and unhinged. "I know you're reading it. Whatever lies he's feeding you are fake. Open up!" Ilara folded the note carefully and tucked it into her bra, securing it out of sight. She splashed cold on her stinging cheek, calming her flushed shoulders. For the first time in her life, she was not the confused, neglected daughter to love. She was a woman uncovering a lifelong lie. She pulled it open. Marianne stood in the hallway, eyes wild, hair slightly disheveled, every inch odd crumbling. Jin stood a few feet behind her, his expression grim and conflicted, no longer fight her battles for her, but no longer willing to enable Manley either. "Give me the note," it immediately. "It's forged. It's political sabotage. The governor is trying to ruin our agenda." "Why would he need to sabotage us?" Ilara asked calmly, steady and unafraid. "Unless there's something worth ruining. Something you've been hiding from me." Marianne's temper flared again. She stepped forward, ready to grab Ilara and search her by force, but Julian caught her on her back firmly. "That's enough, Marianne. You're going too far. You're blind," shouted, yanking her arm free. "Making her destroy everything we have. You have no idea what she's about to unleash." Their public argument drew the attention of nearby hotel staff and lingering guests. 2 uniformed security guards appeared at the end of the hallway to watch the chaotic scene, their pausing waiting for instruction. Julian's face fell, realizing the spectacle was worsening by the second. He turned to Ilara, his tone sharp and final. "Ilara, I'm asking you one last time. Leave voluntarily. If you refuse, I have no choice but to have premises." The words cut deep, but Ilara did not flinch. Her father was choosing threats over honesty, status over his child's truth. In that moment, she let go of every lash of hope for his unconditional support. "Do it," she said simply. "But I'm not leaving. Not before the truth comes out." Julian's jaw tightened. He nodded at the security guard, who began walking slowly toward them, deliberate and unrushed. The threat of being physically moved from the gala hung heavy in the air, a fine intimidate Ilara into submission. Marianne's lip bitter, triumphant smirk. She believed she'd won, that she'd forced Ilara into a corner, that she could before the governor spoke. Before the guards could reach them, a clear, sharp sound cut through the hallway chaos. From the main ballroom, the distinct metallic tap of a sword against a crystal glass rang out once, enough to silence every voice in the venue. The universal signal for attention, for a toast, for an official announcement. All noise ceased instantly. Even Marianne fell silent, into fresh, crippling fear. They could hear Governor Hale's low, authoritative voice echo through the open ball, calm and unyielding. "Good evening, everyone. Before we continue celebrating Julian's birthday, I have a critical overdue matter to address tonight." Ilara's heart raced. The guards froze mid-step, unsure whether to continue to the governor's official address. Julian and Marianne stood locked in place, toward the ballroom in helpless dread. After a lifetime of silence and hidden secrets, the moment of revelation had arrived, and every terrifying, powerful truth Marianne had buried was about to be laid bare for the entire elite crowd to witness. The hallway went perfectly still. The security guards froze mid-stride, their hands hovering loosely at their sides, all priority shifting instantly from removing Ilara to the official address echoing through the ballroom. Julian's shoulders locked up, every trace of his usual easy composure vanishing. Marianne's triumphant smirk dissolved into a gray, hollow panic, the quiet, desperate fear of someone watching their decades-long lie unravel in real time. No one moved. No one breathed. The governor's voice carried steady and unrushed through the open double doors, cutting through the leftover hum of the gala like a blade. "I want to begin tonight by thanking Julian for hosting this beautiful celebration," Governor Hale said, his tone measured and polite. The perfect formal opening for a birthday toast. The crowd settled, soft applause rippling through the ballroom, but the warmth never reached his words. There was weight here, gravity, a purpose far heavier than birthday pleasantries. For years, the Voss family has shaped Bramble Creek's skyline, invested in local development, and built a reputation for stability and refinement in our community. Marianne's rigid frame loosened minutely. For a split second, she dared to hope he might spare them, that his earlier quiet intervention had been nothing more than political courtesy, that the secret was still safe. Alara watched the micro-expression shift, and her certainty only hardened. The calm before the storm was always deceptive. But tonight, Hale continued, his tone dropping, sharp and deliberate. I am not here to talk about development deals, social reputations, or family legacies built on carefully polished appearances. I am here to correct a grave, long-concealed injustice. The light applause died instantly. A thick, stunned silence swallowed the ball. Alara could hear the distant clink of a single dropped glass, a quiet gasp from a guest seated near the stage, the faint rustle of fabric as every attendee leaned forward, alert and angry. Many of you know the late Senator Lila Mae Carter, the governor said, a public servant who dedicated her life to protecting vulnerable families and upholding legal integrity. And what none of you know, what has been sealed and deliberately buried for over 20 is the final legal obligation she entrusted to me before her. Alara's fingers curled tight around the note tucked against her. Every childhood memory she dismissed as odd or irrelevant. Marianne's refusal to discuss her, the locked attic storage, the sudden destruction of old family mementos, the strict rule that Alara never attend state political events. None of it had been random. It had been a calculated. Governor Hale stepped forward to the center of the stage, the spotlight falling fully on. He set a thick, sealed legal binder on the podium, the crisp official paperwork glinting under the stage lights for every. The sound of it landing oft, yet it reverberated through the silent room like a. Senator Carter was appointed legal guardian to a minor child 2 days ago, he stated clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. Upon her terminal diagnosis, she filed sealed court paperwork naming one sole ward and primary heir to her protected personal trust. That child was placed into temporary family care to shield her from public attention until adulthood. That child is. Marianne's breath came fast and shallow. She looked to flee, collapse, to do anything to stop the inevitable revelation. Julian stared at the stage in stunned belief, his eyes wide with a new, horrified understanding, the quiet suspicion he'd buried for years. For 20 years, firmly, the truth of this child's legal identity has been erased from record. Purses were hidden. Court document placed. Family history was rewritten to serve one family's social and financial interests. Tonight I am restoring that truth, he paused, then spoke the words that shattered the entire foundation of the Voss family's carefully. Alara Voss is not merely a daughter by household association. She is the legal ward and sole designated heir of the late Senator Carter. A collective, shocked murmur exploded through the ballroom. Chairs scraped, guests whispered frankly to one another, and every head in the room turned toward the hallway where Alara was in. All the judgmental glances she'd endured all night instantly, from mockery of a disgraced, status daughter, to stunned awe of a young woman with hidden, unparalleled legal. Governor Hale's voice rose over the chaos, saying, the Carter Trust is fully intact, legally protected, and worth more than the total valuation of Voss Development's current Leo. For decades, Alara was denied knowledge of her own inheritance, her legal status, rightful autonomy, all to ensure she remained dependent, controllable, and unable to undermine the Voss social standing. The second the words landed, Julian's face blanched white. He understood immediately what this life's work. His entire multi-million-dollar down development project, company's reputation, his decade of professional progress, all of it paled in comparison to the legacy Marianne had stolen their own daughter. Marianne snapped. All composure shattered completely. She spun toward Alara, her voice shrill and desperate, no longer her panic. This is slander. Those documents are falsified. She never meant to carry that name, never meant to hold that power. She was supposed to be our daughter, obedient daughter. Her silenced the crowd again. A guest watched her unravel, witnessing the high society matriarch lose every ounce of her polished grace. Her desperate denial only confirmed everything. Governor Hale at her interruption. He flipped open the legal binder, displaying stamped court seals, signed affidavits, and official state records for the front to verify. These documents are court-certified, sealed, legally irrefutable. They have been preserved in my personal custody to prevent further tampering. The record is clear. He then delivered the final crush blow to the Voss family's night. Effective immediately, all pending state permits for Julian Voss's downtown redevelopment project are placed on indefinite administrative hold. No further progress will be approved until the full scope of this concealment and its ethical violation. Julian staggered back one step, his face crumpling. Years of work, countless late nights, millions in investments, professional dream he chased it in an instant. He turned to Marianne, his eyes no longer holding guilt or conflict, only masked betrayal. For the first time in their marriage, he looked at her and saw not a perfect, status-driven wife, but a woman who manipulated him, and destroyed his career with control. Marianne could not bear his gaze, bear the crowd's stares, could not bear the weight of her deeds of lies crashing down on her. With a quiet, broken cry, she spun heels and fled down the hallway, her designer heels clicking wildly as the sound faded into the distance. Locking herself away in a private hotel suite of her own making. The hallway fell quiet again, leaving Alara, her devastated father, the frozen security guards, and the distant buzz gossip of the entire gala crowd. Before Alara cast the whirlwind of revelations, a middle-aged man in a sharp navy suit approached her, holding a thick leather document folder, official state legal letter. He spoke softly, respectful and formal, his tone a stark contrast to the judgment endured all night. Ms. Voss, the legal counsel for the Carter Trust. Governor has authorized me to brief you immediately. As sole heir, you hold full discretion authority over all trust assets, including the power to approve, modify, or terminate on state land. Lara's blood ran cold. She stood frozen, finally understood of what had been taken from her. She was not the powerless, disgraced daughter her mother was humiliating and suppressing. She held her father's entire, her family's future, in the palm of her hand. Julian stared, defeated and waiting for her next move. The entire night's chaos, every slap, every insult, every lie, had led to this moment. Alara's humble life had never been a failure, and the only freedom she'd been allowed, while her own truth from her birth. As the lawyer waited for her response, as remained fixed on her every move, Lara realized the unthinkable. The girl who'd been shamed for working a minimum-wage cafe job now held the complete power to save the Voss family empire. The weight of the lawyer's words settled over Alara like a heavy blanket, thick and suffocating yet sharp enough to cut through her lingering shock. For 26 years, her mother had drilled one truth into her head relentlessly. She was reckless, ungrateful, insignificant for turning away from the Voss elite life. For 26 years, she'd believed she owed her parents deference, that their wealth and status made them superior, that her quiet, simple existence was a failure. Now she understood the twisted reality. Marianne had not disciplined her out of care. She'd controlled her out of terror. She'd shamed her humble lifestyle, cut her off financially, and isolated her politically to ensure Alara never stumbled upon the truth of her own power. Every cruel rule, every public humiliation, every cold rejection had been a desperate attempt to keep a stolen legacy buried forever. Ms. Voss? The lawyer's gentle prompt pulled her back to the moment. We can begin the formal briefing whenever you're ready. Your authority is active, effective immediately. Alara lifted her gaze from the embossed legal folder, her hands still steady despite the storm raging inside her. The hallway still hummed with distant gala gossip, every guest dissecting the governor's explosive announcement. Julian stood motionless a few feet away, his shoulders hunched in defeat, his eyes fixed on the floor as if he could hide from the ruin of his career and his merit. Not right now, Alara said quietly, firm and unwavering. I need a minute. Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked toward the hotel's exterior balcony, a quiet escape tucked away from the chaos and staring eyes. She pushed open the glass door, and cool night air rushed over her face, stinging the faint leftover warmth of her mother's sleep. The city lights of Bramble Creek stretched out below her, glittering and endless, the same skyline her father had spent decades building, all of it now hanging on her decision. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing off the crowd's whisper. For the first time since she'd stepped foot in the gala, Alara was alone, free to process the tidal wave of truths that had crashed over her in a single. She pulled the governor's handwritten note from her dress, unfolding it carefully. The short, deliberate words felt heavy, no longer cryptic but devastatingly clear. Senator Carter had chosen her, trusted her, and planned for her future long before she'd ever known to hope for. Marianne had stolen that for her, shrinking her world to small apartments and minimum wage work to feed her own greed and hunger for control. A soft footfall sounded on the balcony stone by. She winced, expecting another plea for mercy, another attempt to fix the But the voice that spoke was calm, and entirely You're taking this far more gracefully than most. Governor Hale stood a few paces back, his suit jacket fluttering faintly in the night breeze. He'd stepped away from the chaos of the room, leaving the gossiping guests and unraveling Voss legacy behind. There was no political performativity in his tone now, no formal speech, only quiet. Alara folded the note and tucked it away, turning. You've known my whole life, she said, not accusing, just stating the quiet pain. You've watched hide me, and never said a word. And Hale nodded slowly, unflinching. I made a deathbed promise. I swore I would not disrupt your childhood unless it became absolutely. She didn't want you growing up a political pawn, surrounded by people who only loved you for your wealth and influence. She placed you with the Vosses, hoping they'd give you a stable, normal life. It was wrong. His voice softened, carrying the weight of years of unspoken guilt. I've waited until you were old enough to choose self. Old enough to understand the power you hold, and the responsibility comes with it. Tonight, Marianne hand. Her public cruelty left me no choice but to set. Alara's chest ached with a tangled mix of anger. Grief for the childhood never gotten. Grief for the unknown senator who'd loved her from afar. Anger at the parents who'd chosen lies of their own daughter. What exactly trust give me? She asked, her tone sharp and businesslike, pushed aside. Complete financial independence, he answered plainly. Real estate, state-managed investment funds, charitable endowments, all protected from outside interference. Legally, no one can pressure you to use it for any purpose you don't endorse, including say father's project. He paused, his gaze steady and honest. Lila's final letter to you in your legal packet. She wrote it knowing you'd one uncover the truth. Her only wish was that you never let anyone else. The words set deep within Alara, rewriting every negative belief held in her. For years she'd chosen a simple life to escape toxicity, convinced she'd running from failure. Now she realized she'd been running them all along. The quiet resilience she'd built in her humble life was far stronger than any of Marianne's. What happens if I let my father's project stay suspended? Quietly. Voss Development faces bankruptcy, mass layoffs, and permanent ruin. Hale replied without sugarcoating the truth. Julie's career will end here. Marianne's social standing will never recover. The entire Voss empire is overnight. It was the perfect revenge she'd never dared to wish for. The ultimate payback for every slap, every insult, every lonely night spent wondering why she was never enough for her own family. She had the power to destroy them completely, to make them feel every ounce of the pain they'd endured for decades. Yet as she sat at the city lights, Alara felt destroy. She only felt clarity. Revenge was easy. Boundaries were harder, more powerful. I'm not going to ruin him, she said finally, resolve hardening in her chest. But I'm not for free either. Governor Hale's lips tugged into an approving smile. Lila was proud of that choice. Power without restraint is corruption. Purpose is justice. The balcony glass door slid open before he could speak further. Julian stepped outside, closed the door softly behind him, blocking out entirely. He looked older in that moment, exhausted and defeated. The confident, successful developer stripped down to a broken man of cowardice. He did not beg, plead for mercy. He simply stood there for a long moment, staring at unmasked shame. When he spoke, his was rough and hoarse. I knew, he admitted quietly. Not all the details, not the full trust value, not the sealed court records. But I knew Marianne was hiding something about you. Old paperwork years ago. Locked in. I asked about it. She lied, said it was outdated legal clutter, threatened to leave me, kept digging. His shoulders slid decades of guilt. I chose my business, my reputation, my easy life over you. Every single time. Buy and let her break you down. Let her erase your truth. Because I was too afraid to lose everything I'd built. I'm so sorry, Alara. I don't expect you to forgive me. Oh, I finally admit it. Alara studied him, no longer feeling the desperate, childish longing for his approval that had lingered for years. The hurt remained, the craving for validation was. She saw clearly now. A flawed, weak man trapped in his own fear, complicit in her pain, cruel like Marianne. I'm not just your project, Alara said, and Julian's eyes glared with quiet, disbelieving hope, not restoring it unconditionally either. From night forward, everything changes. You get your career back, but you lose the right to control me, judge me, or prioritize over my peace ever again. Julian nodded instantly. No argument. I'll agree to anything. His eagerness confirmed everything Alara needed to know. The balance of power had shifted irreversibly. The disgraced low stature was now the family's only savior. Never let them forget it. As the night wind swirled around, Alara locked in her plan. She would fix her father's ruin. She would burn down a toxic rule, every lie, and every unfair expectation the Voss family had ever forced upon her. She would rebuild, not her empire, but her own, on her own terms. But before she could speak her final terms, a sharp knock echoed on the balcony door. A hotel staff member stood outside, face tight and urgent, holding a phone out toward them. Mr. Voss, Ms. Voss, Mrs. Voss has just notified hotel security. She's demanding to press formal and disturbance charges against Alara. Unless you're all trust claim documents immediately. Alara's breath stilled. Beat. Marianne was not done fighting. She's willing to drag them all into legal chaos, to publicize family scandal, just to win back her control. The final battle had just begun. The staffer's urgent announcement hung thick in the cool balcony air, stripping away every last trace of fragile calm. Julian's face drained of the faint hope Alara's compromise had sparked, replaced by weary, exasperated dread. He knew Marianne better than anyone. She would rather burn the entire family to ash than surrender control. Even when every card was stacked against her, she's spiraling. Julian muttered, running a shaking hand over his face. She never knows when to stop. Governor Hale's expression hardened, his casual sincerity fading into sharp authoritative resolve. Trespassing charges won't hold. This gala was a public charity event, open to all invited family guests. Marianne's threats are nothing more than retaliatory harassment. He turned to Alara, his tone steady and reassuring. You hold all legal and moral ground here. If you're willing to settle this tonight, I'll stay as official witness. Alara didn't hesitate. She was done hiding, done waiting for her mother's mercy, done letting fear dictate her choices. I'm ready. Let's end this. They relocated to a small, private hotel conference room down the hallway. A neutral, sterile space with nothing but a long wooden table, plain overhead lighting, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the quiet city streets. No crowd, no audience, no social pretense. Just raw, unfiltered family booth. The governor took a seat in the corner as impartial witness, while the trust lawyer stood quietly by the door, ready to formalize any binding agreement. Minutes later, Marianne pushed open the door. She'd shed every last bit of her polished socialite composure. Her styled hair was frayed, her silk gown creased, her diamond earrings removed, leaving her face bare and rigid with rage. There was no grace, no performance, no carefully curated, only the calculating matriarch, who'd spent 26 years burying secrets and breaking her daughter's. She slammed the door shut behind her, locking the three of them inside, and fixed her blazing gaze directly on it. You think you... She snapped, voice cold and venomous. You think a handful of old court papers make you Alara met her stare openly. No anger, no fear, only quiet, unshakable. I get it. The law proves it. You spent my entire life to me, stripping me of my right, shaming me for choosing humility over your empty status. You cut me off financially 3 years ago, not because I worked a K job, but because you were terrified I'd eventually find the truth. Marianne's straightened, and for a second, her mask cracked completely, revealing the petty, insecure fear at the core of every cruel choice she ever made. I protected you, she hissed hissively. Do you think you would have survived growing up with a target on your back as a player? Do you think the press, the lobbyists, the greedy opportunists would have left you alone? I simplified your life, kept you safe. You controlled me, Alara corrected firmly. Safety isn't hiding some inheritance. Safety isn't public slaps and endless humiliation. Safety isn't making a child feel worthless for choosing independence. Protect me. You protect your own power, reputation, your hold over Dad's. Jules spoke up then, his voice unyielding, a far cry from his usual cuddly silence. It's true, Marianne. You controlled all of it. You hid legal documents, manipulated me for decades, and abused our daughter to preserve your social standing. I'm done letting you the truth. Marianne's head snapped toward him, her eyes blazing with betrayal. Taking her side? After everything I've built for this family? After every gala, every connection, every deal I secured to make company successful? You didn't build this family, Julian retorted, his tone sharp with years of frustration. You built a facade. A perfect image for Bramble Creek's elite, while you destroyed the only good thing we have. I watched you humiliate her tonight in front of every powerful person in this room. I watched you lie, manipulate, and terrorize her for years, doing it anymore. The word landed like a final verdict. Marianne froze, her face flung with rage and disbelief. For decades, Julian had been her quiet accomplice, her safety net, her guaranteed backup. Now he was standing against her for the first time. Alara leaned forward, resting her hand flat on the conference table, and laid out her non-negotiable terms, unwavering. I will risk Father's project permit. I will not interrupt Voss development, and I will not ruin the life you've built her. But in return, you will add 3 permanent boundaries. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in, before continuing steadily. First, you will never comment on my lifestyle, my job, my choice, or my worth again. You have no authority over me, not legally or familially. Second, you will cease all attempts to manipulate, threaten, or control me in any capacity. No more lies, no more public humiliation, no more legal retaliation. Third, you will formally acknowledge my legal status as Carter's heir with no further ado or undermine it. Marianne let out a hollow laugh. You expect me to bow to you? To treat the child I raised as my superior? I expect you to treat me with basic respect, replied calmly. You've never once given me. You don't have to bow. You just have to stop hurting me. Julian didn't hesitate. He reached for the printed agreement the lawyer had prepared minutes earlier, scanning the short list of bounds, picking up the pen. I'll sign it, firmly. Every word this much. He scribbled his signature clean firm at the bottom of the page, then slid the document across the table toward Marianne. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed, waiting for her choice. Marianne felt like it was poison. It was not just a legal agreement, a complete surrender of her power, an admission of every lie she'd told, wrong she'd committed. It was the end of control over the Voss name, over her husband, over the spent a lifetime dominating. After a long, tense silence, the paper away violently. No, she said in final. I won't sign. I won't apologize. I won't bend to the child I raised. If you choose to destroy our family over petty resentment, so be it. I'd rather than admit I was wrong about you. Her choice hung in the air, irreversible and definitive. She would sacrifice her marriage, her social status, her family unity, and humble herself. Governor Hale leaned forward, neutral and official. Mrs. Voss, your refusal to comply does not negate Ms. Voss's legal authority. It only formalizes your voluntary estrangement. From this moment forward, any further harassment or legal threats toward Alara will resemble state-level sanctions. Marianne's lips twisted into a fierce scowl. She stood abruptly, pushing back with a loud scrape against the floor, and turned a single backward glance. Enjoy your holiday, she spat over her shoulder. But my words, this will never be over. The door slammed shut, leaving silence in her wake. The final thread holding the fractured together had snapped completely. Julian's shoulders slumped in defeat, with grief and exhaustion. He turned to Alara, his voice stripped of all pride. I'm so sorry for everything, for letting you, for staying silent, for choosing fear over you all these years. Can I ever get a chance to make this right? I looked at him, her heart heavy but steady. The little girl's father's love and approval was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood love didn't require sacrifice of self, didn't require blind obedience. She glanced at the signed agreement on the table, at the governor's quiet, approving gaze, at the new power and freedom she'd spent her whole life denied. She spoke the words that would define her new future. You can try, but now. All. Julian's breath caught, hope flickering back to life in his eyes. But before he could reply, the governor's phone vibrated once, sharp and official. He checked the screen, then lifted his expression serious. The Carter's full asset report has just been finalized, he said. And there's one fine Senator Carter embedded in your inheritance, and I didn't know existed tonight. In that quiet, exhausted moment after the biggest battle of her life, Lara realized her journey was far from finished. The truth she'd uncovered was only the beginning. The secret of her legacy was still waiting to be revealed. The room's exhausted silence thickened at Governor Hale's revelation. Every battle fought tonight, the public slap, the buried documents, Marianne's feral desperation, Julian's long overdue confession, had peeled back layer after layer of lies. Yet one final, hidden clause remained locked in Senator Carter's trust, waiting to rewrite Alara's story one last time. Julian straightened slowly, his fragile hope freezing into tense anticipation. After everything, he dared not assume redemption was guaranteed. Alara's gaze locked on the governor, steady but guarded, no longer fearful of new truths. She had already survived the worst her family could do. Whatever came next, she could carry it. Governor Hale slipped his phone into his pocket, folded his hands on the table, and spoke in a quiet, reverent tone. Senator Carter left a conditional legacy clause. The full financial trust is yours unconditionally, but she embedded one mandatory provision tied directly to the Voss family. He paused, letting the weight land before finishing. If you chose to forgive and restore Julian's development permit, 30% of the trust's annual revenue must be permanently allocated to local youth community outreach programs. She wrote it specifically to reward mercy over ruin, to ensure the power she left you would heal, not destroy. Alara's breath eased. It was not a trap. It was a purpose. All her life, Marianne had taught her that power meant control, status, and domination. Senator Carter's final wish proved the opposite. True power was the choice to lift others up after you had been hurt deep. She didn't want me to become bitter, Alara murmured, understanding blooming in her chest. Exactly. Hale nodded. She knew you'd grow up hidden, neglected, and stripped of your truth. She feared you might one day burn everything down to get eaten. This clause forces legacy over vengeance. You save your father's work, but you turn the profit into public good. No one gets to manipulate your mercy. It's yours by choice. Julian stared at Alara, his eyes glistening with quiet humility. I'll sign off on every community initiative. I'll rebrand the entire Voss development project around local youth investment. Whatever. For the first time tonight, his voice held no desperation, no self-serving plea. It was simply a father trying to atone for decades of cowardice. Alara smiled faintly, a soft, unforced. We'll do it together. The governor finalized the trust authorization, lifting the indefinite hold on Julian's permits, and filing the community legacy clause into official state record. The night's chaos finally settled into quiet, irreversible resolution. The gala emptied, the gossiping elite gone, the scandal fading from immediate. But the family transformation remained. One later, the dust of that explosive birthday night had settled over Creek, leaving altered lives. Marianne had retreated entirely from piety. Every charity board name, every social circle closed doors, every former friend distanced themselves from scandal. She remained isolated in the family mansion, refused apology, refusing reconciliation, refusing to. She still had wealth and status, but she had lost every person who once validated her empty. Julian, by contrast, rebuilt slowly. He stepped back from elite networking galas, restructured his company's mission around community development, and kept his word to Alara faithfully. Every week he visited her small apartment with takeout coffee and quiet conversation. No pressure, no demands, no expectation. He simply showed up, steady and humble, learning to love his daughter. Alara kept her barista job. She had unlimited wealth disposal, a powerful legal legacy, and the ability to live in luxury for the rest of her days. But she chose to keep her quiet shifts at the neighborhood cafe routine. The regular customers who knew her as Alara, the kind barista who orders, not as a hidden political heir or a distant boss daughter. The life she'd built for herself while bare lies was the life that kept her grounded now that On a quiet evening, Alara sat at her apartment window, holding the small carved wooden box she'd made for day. The gift that started it all. The box that had fallen and spilled across the gala marble the night her world broke open. She opened Senator Carter's personal letter, the one tucked in the trust binder, the last piece. Dearest Alara, I hid you not from hardship, but from corruption. I knew you would grow up kind, gentle, and loyal. I knew the world of power would try to harden you. Never let your pain turn you cruel. Never let the lies others tell define your truth. Your inheritance is not money, it is choice. Choose kindness, choose purpose. Tears stung her, soft and healing, or broken. Understood. She had not lost a fight at the gala. She had escaped one. She had not gained power to dominate. She had gained freedom as she wanted. At her door. Julian stood outside, holding a paper bag of her usual diner snacks, red jacket sleeves. He didn't step inside uninvited. He simply waited, patient and a change. Hey, he said gently, just wanted to check in. No pressure to talk. Alara closed the letter, set down her made gift and come in, Dad. The old desperate craving for parental validation was gone. In its place was calm, clear hope. Would never be a perfect family, Anne would never reconcile. Hers would never fully fade, but healing was possible. For him, for her, for the future they could build together on terms. Outside her window, the city light glowed steady. Once, those lights had represented empty ambition. Now, presented her new legacy. Mercy over vengeance, purpose over status, truth over lies. She being ordinary. Now she was extraordinary, entirely on her own terms.